The Harlem Renaissance was a development of the Harlem neighborhood in New York City as a black cultural mecca in the early 20th century and the subsequent social and artistic explosion that resulted from that. Lasting roughly from the 1910s to the mid 1930s, the period is considered a golden age in African American culture, manifesting in literature, music, stage performance, and art. Through literary works, jazz music, painting, theater, dance, and then so on, these African American men and women residing in Harlem were able to develop a sense of unity and pride through their African American culture and heritage. They were able to grow this black neighborhood very rapidly and turn it to the largest and most famous African American community in the world. Ultimately, the transformation of Harlem during the 1920s was about adapting to new circumstances, claiming space, asserting identity, and cultivating a cultural legacy in the face of systems and systematic racial and gender oppression. The Harlem Renaissance mainly comes and derived from the Great Migration, which was during 1910 to about 1920. African Americans, about 300,000 of them, moved from the South over into the north side of the United States for better opportunities due to the racial inequality they faced in the South. One of the hot spots where Black Americans tend to move was in New York City, specifically the Harlem neighborhood. Obviously, during that time, segregation and general racial inequality existed everywhere in the United States. The North was considered to be better due to its historical context of the Civil War and the ban on slavery, etc. Even so, Black Americans still suffered, especially during the First World War, which occurred during the Harlem Renaissance, as they were forced to do unfair labor and still dealt with heavy segregation and were only wanted for labor because of white men serving into the military while the war was ongoing and therefore needing spaces to be filled for jobs. Even though people were discouraged, they felt no sense of pride in their culture and heritage due to the negative stereotypes that were put onto them. But the Harlem Renaissance started to begin to foster and manifest a sense of pride for the culture that they had, and it led to multiple works like such as music, especially jazz music and dancing. In this artistic photograph that we see here, we can see people dancing to trumpets and loud singing and music, which is a big part of their culture in America. Apart from music and physical pieces of art, literature was a big part from the Harlem Renaissance. Specifically, we can focus on some poetry. One of the two famous poets that we can focus on is Claude McKay, who was born in Jamaica and migrated to the United States. If We Must Die is his most famous piece of work, along with his book Home Harlem, which is actually known to be his most controversial piece. McKay mainly focused on the idea of the American dream and how racial inequality was affecting the idea of America's being a sanctuary to immigrants looking for better lives due to the racial stereotypes, the racist systems that were put in place. That was his main work during the Harlem Renaissance, as he wrote. The next person, Langston Hughes, is the most influential and widely celebrated voice of the Harlem Renaissance. Sarah Pruitt for History.com states that he actually wrote his first and most famous poem, The Speaks of the Rivers, soon after graduating from high school. He also wrote essays, novels, short stories, and plays, and they all centered and celebrated Black life and pride in African American heritage. He was mainly focused, as stated, the pride in African American heritage and culture, and how it is very important for others to feel the exact same way as him. As stated, his most famous poem talks about different locations that constitute some of African Americans or Black culture significantly, such as the Nile in New Orleans. The Nile, as said in the line, I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. It is home to the mysterious pyramids in Africa, which are a big part of African heritage, as they are one of the biggest, one of the mysteries of the world that have come from there and have created such a big part of civilization since then. New Orleans is a hotspot for jazz music that is a huge part of Black culture in the United States. And obviously, as mentioned before, it is a big part of the Harlem Renaissance itself, which is why he used those two locations, as they both had such big impacts on Black culture and Black heritage, that it was just important to talk about how he resonates with that, since he states in his last line, "My soul has grown deep like the rivers." And the rivers can constitute to mean the growth of heritage, the growth of culture and African American lifestyles, and how him being so in touch with his culture and so prideful for his culture shows how he has grown like the rivers. His soul has grown like the rivers, as he feels deeply for his culture and is very prideful of it and loves it and wants others to feel the exact same way. Overall, the Harlem Renaissance's impact really helped constitute a sense of pride and unity for African Americans. It really created the golden age for African American artists and writers and musicians. It gave these artists pride and control over how the Black experience was represented in American culture, and it set the stage for the civil rights movement, which occurred in the 1960s.